What was the world's first writing system? Cuneiform script. Which civilization founded the world's first city-states? The Sumerian civilization. What time measuring devices did the people of Mesopotamia invent? The sundial and the water clock. In what ways did Mesopotamian civilization influence other civilizations? In law, mathematics, and writing. What was the greatest achievement left by the people of Mesopotamia? The invention of writing. How were the cities of the Indus civilization designed? As grid-pattern cities. What were the main crops cultivated in the Indus civilization? Wheat and barley. What did the people of the Indus civilization consider important when building houses? Sanitation and drainage systems. Whose face is the Great Sphinx of Giza thought to bear? Pharaoh Khephren. In the ritual and music system of the Zhou dynasty, what did "ak" refer to? Music and dance. In ancient China, which trees were believed to connect heaven and earth? Mulberry trees and peach trees. On what basis was the Shang dynasty calendar created? The changing phases of the moon. Which region did King Hammurabi unify? The whole of Mesopotamia. Where was the famous library that housed thousands of clay tablet documents in Assyria located? The Library of Ashurbanipal. How did Assyria effectively govern its vast territories? By sending governors to rule the provinces. What was the most powerful aspect of Assyrian military strategy? Siege weapons and a strong cavalry force. Which Athenian hero killed the Minotaur and escaped from the labyrinth? Theseus. What natural disasters are thought to have contributed to the collapse of the Minoan civilization? Volcanic eruptions and tsunamis. What ancient script of the Minoan civilization has not yet been fully deciphered? Linear A. Why did the Mycenaean civilization need strong walls and heavily fortified palaces? To defend against external invasions. Among the frescoes of the Minoan civilization found on Crete, which one features sea creatures? The dolphin fresco. Which representative Mycenaean site is famous for the precious metal artifacts found in its tombs? The tombs of the kings. What important geographical factor allowed the Mycenaean civilization to be sustained on the Greek mainland? Mountain strongholds. What deity was commonly worshipped in both the Minoan civilization and the Mycenaean civilization as a shared religious element? The earth goddess. Along the trade routes of Cretan civilization, with which major cultural regions did important exchanges take place? Egypt and Mesopotamia. What are the representative characteristics and principal motifs of pottery produced in the Minoan civilization? Geometric patterns and marine creatures. Which ancient Greek sanctuary was famous for the Temple of Apollon and its oracle? Delphi. Which sea, where ancient Greek civilization flourished, became the center of the Aegean civilizations? The Aegean Sea. Which kingdom in ancient Greece developed into a powerful state? Macedonia. Who was Achilles' closest companion and a notable fighter in the Trojan War? Patroclus. Which ancient Athenian thinker developed philosophy through the method of question and answer? Socrates. Which philosopher systematically established metaphysics and logic? Aristotle. Which philosopher, famous for the phrase, "everything flows," emphasized constant change? Heraclitus. Which philosopher explained all things in terms of the four elements: water, air, fire, and earth? Empedocles. Which philosopher took a skeptical stance, asserting that nothing can be known with certainty? Gorgias. Which philosopher, a disciple of Socrates, was one of the 30 tyrants? Critias. Who was the founder of the Cyrenaic school, which emphasized individual pleasure? Aristippus. What is the title of the work that records Socrates' defense of himself at his trial? The Apology of Socrates. What device was used in Athens to select public officials by lot? Cleriarion. What was the public support system in Athens through which the state subsidized citizens' participation in cultural events such as theater? The Theorikon, a theater fund. Who commanded the Greek forces at the Battle of Plataea? Pausanias. What was the battle in which Thebes defeated Sparta and became the new dominant power in Greece? Leuctruan battle. Why did Athens and Sparta, who initially cooperated, later come into conflict? A struggle for hegemony. After the Battle of Mycale, what alliance did the Greek allies form after driving out Persia? Delos League. In which year did the Battle of Marathon take place? Year 490 BC. What was the official currency introduced in the Persian Empire by Darius I? Daric gold coin. What is the famous inscription in which Darius I recorded the history and laws of the empire? Behistun inscription. Who was the female commander who distinguished herself on the Persian side at the Battle of Salamis? Artemisia I. What was the policy of tolerant rule introduced by Cyrus the Great of Persia? A policy of religious tolerance. In ancient Egypt, who was the god that ruled over the afterlife? Osiris. What poison did the philosopher Socrates drink when he was executed in ancient Greece? A hemlock potion. In the ancient Aztec civilization, what ritual was frequently performed to please the gods? Human sacrifice. What is the central doctrine of Zoroastrianism that expresses the philosophical concept of the conflict between good and evil? Dualism. Who ascended the throne as the successor of Cyrus II? Cambyses II. What was the main reason why Alexander the Great halted his Indian campaign and turned back? The army's exhaustion and mutiny. Where did Alexander the Great die? Babylon. Which dynasty ruled Egypt after the death of Alexander the Great? The Ptolemean dynasty. In what year did the construction of Persepolis begin? Year 518 BC. What was the most important royal hall, or court audience hall, in Persepolis? The 100-column hall. How did Alexander the Great unify the Greek city-states after he became king? By maintaining the Corinthian League. What did Diogenes say he was looking for while carrying a lantern in broad daylight? An honest man, a truly genuine human being. Which Persian king released the Jews from the Babylonian captivity in ancient Israel? Cyrus II, known as Cyrus the Great. Who is regarded as the ancestor of the Hebrews? Abraham. What was the representative colonial city built by the Phoenicians along the Mediterranean coast? Carthage. What was the main foundation that allowed Carthage to exert powerful influence in the Mediterranean? Maritime trade. What was the decisive battle in which Carthaginian was defeated by Rome? Zama. Approximately how many meters thick were the walls of Babylon? About 25 meters. What tactic did the Persian army often use for defense? Archers deployed in front, infantry behind. What system did Sparta use to train its new recruits? Agage. What was the representative close combat weapon used by Spartan warriors? Sharros, a short sword. What was the name of the shield most commonly used by Spartan soldiers? Hoplons. What innovative tactic did Hannibal use at the Battle of Cannae? Double envelopment tactics. According to Plato's work The Republic, who is the ideal ruler? The philosopher king. What does Plato's allegory of the cave explain? The theory of forms and epistemology. What did Aristoteles claim to be the ultimate goal of happiness? A virtuous life. What large-scale games and festivals did people in Roman times hold to honor the gods and the emperor? Public games, ludi. In the Roman era, what public facilities allowed citizens to check the time officially? Sundials and water clocks. In Roman public baths, what space did people use to socialize and relax? Thermae. In a Roman legion, where were the most experienced veteran soldiers positioned? To the rear of the front line. To where was the capital of the Western Roman Empire moved from Rome? Ravenna. What was the name of the new political system used by Augustus? Principate. In the Roman Republic, how many consuls were elected each year to balance power? 2. What was the name of the decisive naval battle in which Octavian defeated Antony? Actium battle. Why did the Roman Republic begin? The tyranny of the last king, Tarquinius Superbus. In the Roman Republic, which officials were elected to protect the rights of the plebeians? Tribunes of the people. During the Punic Wars, who was Carthage's most powerful general and Rome's greatest adversary? Hannibal. In the Roman Republic, what was the main popular assembly in which citizens voted? The Popular Assembly. What was the most powerful military unit during the Roman Republic era? The Legion. Which part of Alexander the Great's former empire did the Seleucid dynasty rule? The Middle East and Western Asia. Which region with strong religious influence did the Seleucid dynasty rule, eventually provoking a Jewish uprising? Jerusalem. In which naval battle were Cleopatra and Antony defeated by Octavian? The Actium battle. In the feudal system, to whom did the lord pay taxes? His overlord. What human-centered way of thinking was regarded as most important in the Renaissance? Humanism. In which artistic fields did Michelangelo mainly work? Sculpture and painting. In what way did the Renaissance differ in its way of thinking from the Middle Ages? It shifted from God-centered to human-centered thinking. Who improved the steam engine? James Watt. Why did World War I spread beyond Europe to the entire world? Because of colonies and naval warfare. What was a major change in European society after World War I? The collapse of monarchies and the spread of democracy. Which ideology spread through colonial regions after World War I? The principle of national self-determination. Why did public discontent in Germany grow after World War I? Because of reparations and territorial losses. By what means did Ashoka, the unifying monarch of India, spread Buddhism? By erecting stone pillars. How did Roman emperors govern their provinces and colonies? By dispatching governors. How did ancient kings use religion in politics? To enhance their sacredness and authority. In return for their labor in the manor, what did serfs receive? Protection and a livelihood. Did the Code of Hammurabi impose the same penalties regardless of social class? No, the punishments differed according to class. Around which philosophy did Qin Shi Huang organize the governance of his state? The philosophy of legalism. The founder of Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama, was a prince of which country or region? India. What is the most important sacred text of Judaism? The Torah. Who was the dictator that led Germany during World War II? Adolf Hitler. Which country entered World War II as a result of the attack on Pearl Harbor? The United States. The name, Mesopotamia, means land between two rivers. What are the names of these two rivers? The Tigris River and the Euphrates River. In Mesopotamian civilization, what was the stepped structure built in honor of the gods called? A ziggurat. Sumerian civilization was the earliest civilization in Mesopotamia. Which of the city-states founded by this civilization is one example? Ur. What method did the people of Mesopotamia use in order to farm their land? Irrigation agriculture. What did lords build to display their power? Castles or cathedrals. Who was the President of the United States during part of the war and is also famous for the New Deal? Franklin Delano Roosevelt. During World War II, which country fought Germany bitterly and bore the main burden on the Eastern Front? The Soviet Union. What was the main reason European countries set out on voyages of exploration during the Age of Exploration? To secure trade opportunities and wealth. Which empress is famous for leading the Byzantine Empire during its heyday? Empress Theodora. Why did the Renaissance influence the Protestant Reformation? Because it spread critical and independent thinking. Why did people in Britain have such short lifespans during the Industrial Revolution? Because of poor living conditions and a lack of medical care. Outside of India, which region was influenced when King Ashoka spread Buddhism? Southeast Asia. Why did ancient Chinese kings place such importance on records and laws? To establish clear standards for governance. For what main purposes did medieval European kings collect taxes? To maintain military power and operate the royal court. What is the name of the supreme god in Greek mythology? Zeus. Which Chinese dynasty was described in Marco Polo's The Travels of Marco Polo? The Yuan dynasty. Which battle in the American War of Independence helped secure French support? Saratoga Battle. What weapon used by Germany in World War I inflicted heavy damage on the Allies? Submarine. Who was the first leader of the Soviet Union established after the Russian Revolution? Lenin. What new political system did the revolutionary government in France establish after executing the king? Republican form of government. What international trade route did the Mongol Empire develop while linking East and West? The Silk Road. Which representative Renaissance sculptor created the statue of David? Michelangelo. Who was the leading proponent of Enlightenment thought that formed the ideological basis of the American Revolution? Locke. In medieval Europe, what was one form of music that developed centered around the church? Gregorian chant. What was the new calendar proclaimed by the National Convention during the French Revolution? The Revolutionary Calendar, French Republican Calendar. Which front, one of the main fronts of World War I, was where Germany and France clashed? The Western Front. During the Cold War, what was the military alliance treaty concluded by the Soviet Union with Eastern European countries? The Warsaw Pact. Due to the influence of the Mongol Empire and the resulting active cultural exchange between East and West, which major invention was transmitted to Europe? Gunpowder. During the American War of Independence, which diplomat was sent to obtain support from France? Benjamin Franklin. After India's independence, in which year was Mahatma Gandhi assassinated? Year 1948. What was the name of the massive tomb structures built for ancient Egyptian kings? The pyramids. What do we call the roughly 200-year-long period of peace in the Roman Empire? Pax Romana. What was the wave of change brought about by inventions and technological innovations that began in 18th century Britain? The Industrial Revolution. Who founded the People's Republic of China in 1949 and became its first head of state? Mao Zedong. What were the three wars fought between ancient Rome and Carthage for control of the Mediterranean called? The Punic Wars. What was the war between Qing China and Britain that resulted in the unequaled Treaty of Nanjing in the 19th century? Opium War. Which people dominated Mediterranean trade and created a phonetic alphabet that they transmitted to Greece? Phoenicians. What was the wave of technological innovation in the late 19th century characterized by advances in electricity, chemistry, and steel? The Second Industrial Revolution. What was the defense organization formed by Western countries during the Cold War to oppose the Soviet Union? NATO. Which ancient statesman laid the foundations of Athenian democracy? Cleisthenes. Which Islamic leader recaptured Jerusalem during the Crusades? Saladin. Which city was the capital of the Aztec civilization and later became Mexico City? Tenochtitlan. Which French absolute monarch is known as the Sun King? Louis XIV. Which Prussian chancellor led the process of German unification? Otto von Bismarck. What was the first socialist state founded by the October Revolution of 1917? The Soviet Union. What event became the symbol of the end of the Cold War? The fall of the Berlin Wall. At the end of the Roman Republic, which general gained power after the First Triumvirate? Julius Caesar. During which period of time were peace movements opposing U.S. military intervention in the Vietnam War particularly active? The late 1960s. What was the name of the school that Plato founded in Athens? The Academia. After Alexander the Great's death, what was the name of the dynasty that ruled the Egyptian region? The Ptolemaic dynasty. Which gladiator led the largest slave revolt in the Roman Empire? Spartacus. In France, what was the incident in which the Jewish officer Alfred Dreyfus was charged with espionage? The Dreyfus Affair. What was the code name of the U.S. project to develop the atomic bomb? The Manhattan Project. What was the famous phrase used in Churchill's speech that marked the beginning of the Cold War? Iron Curtain. What is the name of the event in which Muhammad, the founder of Islam, migrated from Mecca to Medina? Hijra. Which political leader directed the Reign of Terror immediately after the French Revolution? Maximilien Robespierre. Who was the supreme leader of the Chinese Communist Party who led the Cultural Revolution in China? Mao Zedong. Which explorer was the first European to round the Cape of Good Hope and open the sea route to India? Vasco da Gama. What was the peace treaty concluded immediately after the Russo-Japanese War? Treaty of Portsmouth. At which battle did France suffer defeat in Vietnam and subsequently withdraw? Dien Bien Phu Bao. Which country implemented the apartheid policy? South Africa. In which city can you find the Terracotta Army created by the first emperor of the Qin dynasty in ancient China? Xian, who was crowned emperor in 962 and revived the Holy Roman Empire. Otto I. What was the decisive event that triggered the Pacific War between the United States and Japan? Pearl Harbor attack. What famous phrase did Caesar utter to proclaim his victory in the Gallic Wars? Weenie Weedy Wiki. What famous book did Gutenberg first print? The Bible. Who became the first Roman emperor and established the Principate? Augustus. What was the policy by which Nazi Germany carried out the genocide of the Jews during the Second World War? Holocaust. Which Viking leader founded the Duchy of Normandy in the 9th century? Rollo. Which leader founded the first unified kingdom in Mesopotamia? Sargon. What was the name of the Showa emperor who led Japan during wartime? Hirohito. What was the name of the Berlin Wall checkpoint that became a symbol of the Cold War? Checkpoint Charlie. What is the name of the Islamic State that was created by the partition of India in 1947? Pakistan. What was the name of the powerful banking family that ruled Florence during the Renaissance? The Medici family. Which Sumerian city-state in Mesopotamia is famous for the Epic of Gilgamesh? Uruk. What is the name of the church rebuilt by Justinian that still stands in Istanbul today? Hagia Sophia. At which battle in 1896 did Ethiopia defeat the Italian colonial invasion forces? The Adwa Battle. What was the name of the leader who headed the Gladiator Revolt in 73 BC? Spartacus. In which Indonesian city was the Asian-African Conference held in 1955? Bandung. Who was the ancient Greek philosopher who served as the tutor of Alexander the Great? Aristoteles. Which king built the Palace of Versailles, the symbol of absolute monarchy in France? Louis XIV. When did the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan begin? Year 1979. What was the large-scale massacre that occurred between Hutu and Tutsi people in Rwanda? Rwanda genocide. When did the terrorist attacks occur in which the World Trade Center in New York City and other targets in the United States were struck? 9/11 terrorism attacks. Which British biologist advocated the theory of evolution through his work on the origin of species? Charles Darwin. What was the name of the first socialist government established by workers in 1871? Paris Commune. What was the name of the incident in which a British passenger ship was sunk by Germany during World War I? Lusitania Incident. Which ancient Athenian philosopher taught his students through the method of question and answer? Socrates. What was the name of the Roman senator who led the plot to assassinate Caesar? Brutus. What is the common title of the collection of essays published in support of the ratification of the U.S. Constitution? The Federalist Papers. Thank you for watching until the end. We'd love to hear your feedback and historical insights in the comments. Your support helps us create even more history quizzes. Let's keep exploring together.